Hello, in this video I'll show you how you can set up your low poly and high poly objects and how you can bake them in Substance Painter. So the first thing we have to do is set up some things here. So the first thing I can show you is that we can work with layers to make things easier here. So for example here, I've got several items that I modeled from Resident Evil 2, just inspired from Resident Evil things. Here we got a knife and locker terminal. And if you look in the description, you'll see a download link to all these objects here, the high poly and low poly for everything here. So I also got a high poly and low poly knife right here. So right now, each object is on the separate layer here. So we have the key, double click on that, we have the knife, and we have the locker terminal. But it's also a good idea to use nested layers, which are basically layers within a layer, to categorize both the high poly and low poly. So for example, for the key, let me just hide knife and locker terminal just by clicking this eye icon right here. And notice right now the locker terminal layer is active because we have this little blue icon here. Let's click on the key layer to make it active. We can select the key layer and then click on create new layer. And as you can see, this layer is now located within the key layer. So I can just click on this, click it once more to activate the naming system. And I can call this, for example, key. I'll just turn off caps lock here. Key low, for example. So the main layer can hold the high poly, and we can have a nested layer holding the key low. So with the key low being the active layer, I'll click on this button to add to active layer. So there we go. Now I can just press the eye icon and we can see just the high poly right here with the low being invisible. So with this, what I can do is, as I was creating this object, I pretty much use the same pivot system, for example. So I would take the, for example, high poly and duplicate it right here and turn off things like open subdiv, turbo smooth, and just fix it up here to make the low poly here. So now what I can do, since both the low poly and high poly have the same pivot point, I can simply press Alt A or Shift A to bring it back here. If I press Alt A, it's going to give me some extra options right here. So Shift A is a little bit faster. And actually, let me create a high layer as well. So I will select key, new layer, simply click, and then call this key high. And we'll put that, I'll just turn off key low, select that, and then key high. So there we go. And they're both conveniently under the key layer right here. I also have this one little object which I use for Pro Boolean to create the key shape right here. So I can just keep that off here. Okay, so now we have all the high poly objects on key high. We can turn that off and we can have key low be visible. So let's connect all our objects and set up the UVs real quick here. So what I'm going to do, notice I have turbo smooth here, but that's fine. It's off here, so that's fine here. We have turn to poly, which is a good idea because it will kind of triangulate your mesh here, or at least get rid of n-gons right here. So notice we have a lot of n-gons are here, a very large n-gon, lots of sides here. Activate turn to poly, that's all fixed. This n-gon is fixed. There we go, ready for unwrapping. So notice how all my objects pretty much have turned to poly. It's just a way to get rid of n-gons real quick here. So notice how this object is going inside of here, which means we don't actually need this polygon here. So always do a check before you export to make sure you have all the unnecessary edges, polygons removed. Here I've just got loops here to establish the curvature right here. Now one thing to know here is that with the high poly, it's fine to have this kind of topology right here. You can see it looks very square here, but that's because it's going to be subdivided and it'll become nice and smooth here. But for the low poly, we don't want to have this right here. So a quick way to get a smooth low poly is to apply open subdiv or turbo smooth, whichever one you're using. Let's say 2 iterations to get that smoothness right here. Then apply edit poly. Then select your unnecessary edges. So what I'll do here is select ring and then remove these ones here. And deselect these ones. Loop. hold Control and click here to remove, and there we go. And now we can also go in here and remove these as well and just spend some time fixing up the ones here. You pretty much want to focus on the silhouette. So for example, we want all these edges here, but maybe this one we can get rid of, this loop, maybe this loop. So pretty much that's how you can get a low poly real quick with these kinds of strap objects. Shift A, bring it back here, and let's hide the high poly. Okay, so now what I'll pretty much do is, starting with, let's say this, I can apply Edit Poly and simply attach them all together here, or simply use Attach List. There we go. It's now all one object here. Unwrap UVW, open UV Editor, Control A, Mapping, Flatten Mapping. Alright. So one thing to keep in mind about using Unwrap UVW right here is that everything is unwrapped, as you can see here. Now I'll exit out of Polygon. Now if I apply Edit Poly and then Unwrap UVW, go back into OpenUV Editor, notice what's happened. The UVs have been destroyed, reset. So here's what you want to do instead. Unwrap, make sure everything's good here, and then right click and collapse too. And now I can apply Edit Poly, Unwrap UVW, and notice how all the UVs are maintained. So just one thing to keep in mind in case your UVs are accidentally destroyed and wondering what's happening here. Okay, so our low poly is unwrapped, but now what we need to do is actually detach all these objects. If you have a huge object with lots of elements and you want to save some time, you can download a free collection of scripts called Soulburn Scripts, and there is a script called Object Detacher, which will take all individual elements and detach them as separate objects here. If you'd like to save time, you can find a link to that script in the description for this video. But since I have a relatively simpler object here, I'll just do it myself here. I've got that set to a hotkey, D, and I can just detach this. And as I detach this, I'm going to give this a proper name. So I'll call this key 1 low, key 2 low, key 3 underscore low, Alright, so now all of our objects are unique right here, but they all can share the same texture map because they've all been unwrapped together. Now what I can do real quick here, just select these objects, go into hierarchy, FF pivot only, and make the pivot be 0 on the x-axis. The reason for this is because now with the pivot at 0, what I can do is simply move all of this, and to return it back to 0, I can just enter in 0 right here. So I'll do the same thing for the names, except this time I'll call it key 1 underscore high. I can just Control C to copy this, go down here and just change a single number here. So one more thing I'll do here before exporting is to give these objects more distinct colors here. So I will select the objects by their material. So for example, metal, or a more chrome type of metal right here. Press M, I'll just create a standard material right here. And you can use the RGB method. So pretty much pick the objects with the most mass and give that R. Alright, then the second most mass, give it G, green. So let's say this right here. And then the third object will be B and blue. Alright, and you can give it a name as well. So for example, I'll call this metal, and then the green object is supposed to represent, let's say, leather or rubber here. So I'll just say leather. And the third one will represent some sort of plastic right here. So I'll just call this plastic. So my high poly method, I have two different methods that I've used here. One is to use chamfer. And what chamfer will do is pretty much just chamfer and smooth out the edges here. You can see I pretty much use this as a pro boolean object to cut away this here. Apply chamfer on top and then just turn the poly just in case. So that's one method. Second method is using open subdiv. And third method is using turbo smooth right here. So I will now export the high poly. I'll select all of it. File, export, export selected right here. And so one very important option here is that you want to make sure turbo smooth is turned off. And then once you click on OK, it's going to give you this warning message right here, which says it will calculate the meshes according to iteration values with the corresponding turbo smooth modifiers. Now right here, 3ds Max only recognizes turbo smooth, but it will count open subdiv as well. So you can see, for example, it says key too high, but key too high is actually using open subdiv. So that counts open subdiv as well. So pretty much you want to make sure it's actually on when you export it, and you want to make sure the turbo smooth option is off, and then it will export properly. Alright, now for the low poly, first of all, I'll just turn off the high layer. Now select this, move it to 0, make sure it matches up. It does. And export this also as an FBX file. And Substance Painter, I'll go into File, New, and click on Select, navigate to where I export the low poly FBX and select it. You can also set your document resolution. I'll just use 2048. We can also change this later. If you've baked out the meshes in a different program, the normal map, you can actually add it right here. But I'll just do all my baking here in Substance, so I'll click on OK. So in order to bake the high poly into this and get normal map and all the other maps as well, we can just click on Bake Textures. You can select your high poly by clicking on this, navigate to the folder and select the file. So in this case, it's key_high.fbx. Here you can change your max frontal distance, max rear distance. However, if you change this to be too high, it'll give you all sorts of problems here. So I recommend keeping this low. And match, we want to have by mesh name. And so right here, we can actually choose what the suffix is. That's why I used _high_low. You can customize this to your liking. For example, if you want to listen about this further, you can just make it _hi for the high poly. But I'll just stick with the default right here. And also, if you want a more high quality result without the jaggies, you can actually increase this, but this may greatly increase your baking time right here. So I'll just use 2x2. And then you can click on Bake Textures and wait for it to finish. And here is the bake in effect. So you can see what it looks like with the normal map. And then if I click on this X button right here, you can see how it looks without it. So normal map gives a nice smoothness to all the hard edges here. And also real quick, I'll show you how you can apply different materials to different parts of your model using the color ID map right here. So this is layer 1. You can right click and then press remove layers, or simply press the delete key on your keyboard here. So first, let's get a basic chrome material here. So I'll just scroll down here, materials, and I'll just find, let's say, aluminum. I'll just click and drag this into here. And now the whole key is aluminum. We can shift right click to rotate the light here. Let's say right here, capture these scratches nicely. Alright, so now let's say I want to give this a plastic material here. So I'll scroll down here. Let's say plastic base. I'll click and drag this to be not right here, not below, but right on top here. With a white line on top. Let go. But now it's all plastic. So let's right click. Add mask with color selection. And I want to make sure this right box is selected. Click on color selection. And here is the ID mask. You can see the RGB system that we created in 3ds Max. Click on pick color. It's going to change the color of your geometry here. These are the colors we baked in from the 3ds Max materials. So I will just hover over the blue and click that, and there we go. Now the plastic material only affects this geometry right here with this color. Let's also add some sort of leather or rubber for the grip right here. So I'll just scroll down here. Let's say uniform rubber. Click and drag this on top of plastic base. Once again, everything is rubber. Right click, add mask with color selection. Pick color. And so that is green. I'll click the green, and there we go. If I want to change the color of the plastic right here, I'll go back to plastic base, advanced parameters, plastic color. So I make this kind of a dark plastic just like it is in the video game screenshot, and click on the X. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, how you can set up all of your objects, unwrap them, export them, bake them, and also how you can use the color ID mask.